They tell you that failure comes from laziness. They say it's because you're not working hard enough, or that you simply lack motivation. But that's not the whole truth. That's not the real reason you keep failing. I've watched men and women of great strength, of clear vision, fall again and again despite their effort, despite their ambition, despite their desire to succeed. And I have come to this conclusion. You fail not because you are lazy. You fail because you are inconsistent. Inconsistency is the hidden destroyer, quiet, subtle, and almost invisible. It disguises itself as effort. It gives you just enough movement to make you feel like you're doing something, but never enough to produce results. Let me explain this through the story of a man named Thomas. Thomas was a blacksmith's apprentice. I met him in a northern town where the winters were harsh and the days long. He was strong, determined, and full of ideas. He spoke often of opening his own forge one day, of building tools and machinery that would last generations. He had vision, and he was willing to work. In the early months of his apprenticeship, Thomas showed remarkable dedication. He arrived before dawn. He stayed after others had gone home. He studied the craft with sharp eyes and eager hands. His master praised him often, saying, "This boy will go far." But over time, something began to shift. He started coming in later, just by a few minutes at first. He'd say, "I didn't sleep well, or I'll make up for it tomorrow." He stopped cleaning his tools with care. "They'll still work," he'd shrug. When the forge was cold, he hesitated. "It's too early to start the fire." And on days when he was meant to help deliver goods, he made excuses. A sore leg, a sick cousin, a headache. But when you asked him, he always had plans. "I'm just figuring things out," he would say. "Once I have my own shop, I'll do things properly." This went on for years. He never stopped working, but he also never followed through consistently. He would push hard for a week, then disappear to distraction. He would set goals, then abandon them halfway. He spoke of greatness, but lived in hesitation. His master eventually stopped correcting him. He simply shook his head and said, "A man who cannot master his own habits will never master anything." When Thomas finally saved enough to open his own forge, things crumbled quickly. Clients came once, but didn't return. Orders were half finished, deliveries were late. His tools rusted. The shop grew quiet. He blamed the economy, the town, even his former master. But the truth was clear. Thomas didn't fail because he lacked skill. He failed because he lacked consistency. He treated discipline as something to turn on and off. He believed effort was enough, but effort without persistence is a fire that dies before it cooks a meal. The real reason he failed? He couldn't keep promises to himself. And that, my friend, is the truth no one wants to tell you. It's not your dream that's broken. It's not your plan that's flawed. It's that you haven't stayed with it long enough. You let emotions dictate your effort. You act when you feel good, then retreat when it's hard. But anything worth having requires steady, uncomfortable, daily action. Success is not about intensity, it's about repetition. And failure? Failure begins the moment you tell yourself, "I'll start again tomorrow." You don't need more ideas. You need more follow-through. You don't need louder motivation. You need quieter discipline. You don't need a perfect start. You need relentless continuation. This is what no one tells you. They cheer when you start. They applaud when you dream big. But few will stand beside you when the routine gets dull, when the grind feels pointless, when no one is watching. But that's where winners are born. In silence, in repetition, in boring, brutal consistency. Don't be like Thomas. Don't become a man who worked hard in bursts but never long enough to build anything that lasted. The real reason you keep failing, you stop. And every time you stop, you train yourself to quit. It is not the world that defeats you. It is your own unwillingness to continue without applause. That's the enemy. And unless you learn to defeat it, your story will repeat. Let me now tell you about a woman named Eleanor. Her story is not well known. She never stood on great stages. Her name was never printed in newspapers. But her life is one of the clearest answers I have ever seen to the question of why some people fail and others succeed. Eleanor was born into hardship. Her father was a laborer, her mother a laundress. They lived in a cramped tenement on the edge of a gray industrial city. Work was scarce. Money was scarcer. But Eleanor had something rare. Not talent, though she had some. Not connections. She had none. What she had was a quiet, burning determination to never go back once she had moved forward. From a young age, she took interest in textiles. She would spend hours watching her mother mend torn clothing, fascinated by the way threads could turn ruins into garments again. At the age of 14, she began working at a textile mill, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. The noise was deafening. The conditions were brutal. But Eleanor watched and learned. She saved every coin she could. What separated her was not brilliance. It was that she never allowed failure to stop her momentum. When she was 17, she applied for a supervisor role, a bold move for a girl with no education, no title, no social standing. The manager laughed. "Come back when you're 25 and know something about business," he said. She did not cry. She did not complain. She simply kept working and studying. At night, she taught herself arithmetic. She copied patterns by candlelight. She read discarded pages from industrial catalogs. Every week, she took a few coins to a local printer and asked for one more page from a book on production techniques. By 20, she tried again, rejected again. But Eleanor was not like most people. She did not let rejection become an identity. She let it become fuel. At 22, she took a different approach. She gathered 3 other women who worked with her and offered to teach them how to increase output. "We may not be supervisors," she said, "but we can behave like ones." Together, they began refining their workflow, tracking time, minimizing waste. Within months, their corner of the factory was producing more than any other team. The manager noticed. This time, he didn't laugh. He promoted her. And once she stepped into that new role, she didn't stop. She studied management. She learned negotiation. She began attending meetings she was never invited to, simply by showing up and taking notes. By the age of 30, she managed an entire department. At 35, she was running her own textile shop with 10 employees. And by 45, she owned a small but respected factory of her own. Now understand this. She failed often. Her first year in business, she nearly lost everything. A shipment of cloth was ruined in the rain. A dishonest supplier cheated her. She fell behind on wages. But she did not walk away. She did not blame the economy. She did not curse her circumstances. She solved one problem, then the next, quietly, relentlessly. She once told me something I have never forgotten. She said, "When people see my success, they think I had better luck. But the truth is, I simply refuse to stop." That is the power of consistency, not brilliance, not advantage, persistence. You see, success is not built in days of enthusiasm. It is built in the hours when you want to give up, but don't. Eleanor's story matters because it shows you what's possible when you treat action like a duty, not an option. She didn't wait for ideal timing. She didn't need applause. She chose to move forward again and again, even when everything told her to quit. She wasn't more gifted than others. She was simply more faithful to her goal. And that, my friend, is what separates those who rise from those who remain. Failure doesn't always come from one big collapse. Often it arrives slowly, through 1,000 little surrenders. When you break your promises to yourself, when you quit the habit that was helping you, when you stop doing what worked because it no longer feels exciting, that's when failure begins. But when you keep going, quietly, daily, steadily, you become someone unrecognizable to your former self. The world changes not for those who shout the loudest, but for those who move with quiet force. If you want to stop failing, stop stopping. Let the story of Eleanor remind you. Every time you show up when it's hard, you build something inside that cannot be bought or borrowed. You build strength. You build proof. And eventually you build success. Now that we have walked through these stories, I must speak to you directly and with urgency. You must understand this. Failure is not your enemy. Failure is your mirror. It shows you where you quit, where you hesitated, where you chose comfort over commitment. The real reason you keep failing is not because life is unfair, though it can be. It is not because others are more talented, though some may be. It is not because you lack time or opportunity or support. The real reason you keep failing is because you keep negotiating with your responsibilities. You treat your progress as optional. You treat your discipline as temporary. You start strong, but then you fade. You promise change, but you allow feelings to cancel your decisions. Let me be plain with you. No one ever became successful by doing what they felt like doing. Discipline is not about emotion. It is about direction. Most people confuse energy with commitment. They start only when they're inspired. They act only when conditions are perfect. But let me ask you, what happens when the inspiration fades? What happens when life grows quiet and no one is clapping? You stop. And that, my friend, is the real cause of repeated failure. Not lack of intelligence, but lack of endurance. You haven't failed because you're incapable. You failed because you abandon yourself the moment the journey gets hard. I have seen this pattern again and again. A man begins with vision, sets his goals, and begins walking. But he hits resistance. He meets criticism. He faces boredom. Instead of pushing through, he rewrites his goals. Instead of strengthening his mind, he lowers his standards. And so he fails not because the goal was unreachable, but because his commitment was negotiable. Let me give you something to remember. The successful man does not wait for the path to be easy. He becomes stronger than the path is hard. That is the difference. Now listen closely. If you're willing to stop treating your goals as wishes and start treating them as duties, your life will transform. If you are willing to show up when no one is watching, to work when the thrill is gone, to move forward when your energy is low, you will succeed. Not because life owes you anything, but because you will have earned everything. You may not control the outcome, but you do control the effort. So let me ask you, are you willing to work after the motivation leaves? Are you willing to keep moving without applause? Are you willing to do what must be done, even when no one sees it? Because if you are, then your failures will begin to disappear, not because you'll never fall again, but because you will stop staying down. You don't need more luck. You don't need another chance. You need to stop quitting. I said once, and I say again, self-help is not about waiting. It is about becoming. You want to stop failing? Then stop breaking your promises to yourself. Honor your commitments. Build your consistency. Show up like your future depends on it, because it does. Then one day, when you look back, you will see what I have seen. That the difference between those who succeed and those who do not is not talent, not opportunity, but persistence without excuse. Now rise and begin again.